Hi, friends. I just wanted to come and have a little chat with you while I drew in my art journal. This is the Fern Book. You can see the whole series of me creating this book from scratch, and it's filled with all sorts of different kinds of papers. But one of the papers that I included was this craft paper, which I love drawing on. I love drawing on it so much that I am in the midst of starting to make a book that's solely out of craft papers. A lot of them from packaging from Amazon orders, and some even just the actual envelopes that Amazon orders can sometimes come in, as well as any brown paper goods I can get my hands on. Sorry, my family interrupted me there and came in from playing outside in the snow. So one reason that I really love this paper is because materials just lay down differently on it. This is, I believe, a Faber-Castell pencil crayon. Sorry, colored pencil, as those outside of Canada might call it. And I actually don't really love it when I'm coloring with pencil crayons because I love Prismacolor Premier pencils because they can lay down over top of other mediums really well. However, I am also recognizing that I have a lot of supplies and I need to be using the supplies that I have or else getting rid of them. So I'm trying to be intentional about using some of the stash that I have to see, do I like it? Do I really want to keep it? Or do I want to get rid of it? So hence using this pencil in this book. Also, I have a severe love of the indigo color of the Prismacolor pencil crayons, and for a while my store was out of them. So I was exploring similar colors in different brands to see if there could be a suitable option as a backup. This was an option I tried. It is not a backup, but it's going down quite nicely on this craft paper. So I'm just trying a little plant. I don't know if I can't even remember now if I had a reference that I was looking at. It was just an evening of painting quietly while watching some guilty pleasure show or listening in the background is usually how it works while my husband was trying to put kids to bed. So I am in a season also of loving swatching. Scratch that. I am not in a season. I am always loving swatching. So I decided to include in this little drawing, in this little page, the swatches for all the colors that I'm using. So this marker and the next markers you'll see me using are Arrtx acrylic paint markers with a brush tip. I first learned about them from the YouTube creator By Bun, Roxanne Coble, and she raved about them. And I watched her rave about them for months and months and months. And finally, in the fall, I decided I'm going to try these because I love Posca markers and they are so expensive. And this you could get like a massive set of $60 or 60 pens for the same price as buying maybe like 6 pens of Posca pens. So they are relatively opaque. Some of the lighter colors not as opaque, but that's really hard to come by in paint markers. It's even hard to come by in paint. However, the colors going down on this craft paper was just so satisfying. They still showed up rich, bright, even with the brown underneath. And I was so happy with them. And I loved filling in those little swatch circles as I painted. So one thing I wanted to chat a bit about here was art, being an artist and wanting to make art, but also wanting your art to sustain your art practice. In 2013, I started my art business as a business. I was a budding calligrapher and I had always been an artist my whole life, but I never was selling it or making an effort to sell it. I had had a couple little shows I was part of in high school or just after high school, and I actually had sold paintings, but I was never something that I was actively pursuing. In January 2013, which is 13 years ago, which boggles my mind, my husband encouraged me to open up an Etsy shop and start selling some of my work. And I remember I was hand lettering and painting greeting cards and selling them for $8 each Canadian. And that was original cards. These were not printed reproductions. That was like putting time in. And it's crazy to me now because you can barely buy a card at the grocery store for $8 anymore. And those are all mass production cards. So I started there and eventually started growing. Etsy wasn't super saturated then. Instagram wasn't super saturated then. And it was pretty dreamy time to be an artist. However, I was very green in the business aspect of things, understandably. I had no idea what I was doing. I was kind of winging it and didn't really understand how to grow a business. So, fast forward, I was taking on any kind of commission of calligraphy that I could, so much so that I was making a whole ton of pieces for people, often for strangers, that I didn't enjoy making. And I was really becoming burnt out on taking on these commissions just for the dollar and not being able to paint things that I wanted to paint. I still was making my own pieces and selling prints and reproductions of those, but my bread and butter was becoming these commissions, and I was really, really not enjoying it. I was so much so not enjoying it that I debated about quitting altogether because the passion and the love of art was still there, but I was not getting the opportunity to make anything that came from or stemmed from that passion. So I quietly started to filter out commissions. I wasn't taking them on. I had limited prints that I was finishing up selling. And when they were out of stock, they were out of stock. And it was right around the start of the 100-day project in the year. So if you haven't heard of the 100-day project, it is this challenge that creators or makers do, I'm pretty sure all over the world, that you pick kind of a topic or a technique or something that you are going to make something for 100 days straight. And I decided I am going to do a painting a day that is not related to what I had been doing in calligraphy. I was going to do 100 paintings to try to find my style on painting on canvases again. Because I had painted on canvases before but had been dedicating so much of my time to calligraphy and weddings and quote prints and things like that that I hadn't painted on a canvas in years. So I was pregnant with my first child, decided to take on this challenge, and got to day 89 before I ended up giving birth. So unfortunately, the challenge didn't really line up with when the end of my pregnancy was, but I knew I was going to be able to get through most of it if I could really hunker down. I had to break my rules for 1 week because we had gone on a trip to Hawaii and I just brought a little watercolor palette. But part of my rules was that I was not going to paint with watercolor, because when I was doing calligraphy, any painting that I was doing had been watercolor. So this was getting myself back into acrylics or oils, mostly ended up being acrylics, just for the sake of being able to finish a painting every day, and with a little bit of, teeny bit of watercolors tossed in there. And I really enjoyed it. A lot of them I actually loved painting, and I loved the end result. Quite a few of them I realized, like, no, that was, you could tell I was just getting it done for the sake of getting it done that day. That was not a painting that I was proud of in the least. But either way, it got me kind of out of the funk of working for commissions. And I also relieved myself of the pressure of creating any of these things for any money. They weren't a collection that I was working towards, probably because I didn't understand collections yet at that point. And they weren't for sale. They were just for me. They were for just the practice, the process of practicing art. So I had my baby in 2018. I had another baby in 2019, and throughout that time, I was still trying to paint. I did paintings with my first baby asleep in my lap, in my arms. Once the second one came, and they're only a year apart, I had a little less time on my hands. But when 2020 came, they were old enough and big enough to sit in the bike trailer, tow behind bike trailer that we had. And my precious husband knew how important art making was for me and for my own sanity, that he would take the kids every day on a huge bike ride in the afternoon. And we lived at a place that had a lot of trails. It was relatively flat, so it was easy riding for him carrying two kids. And I was able to just paint. Around that time, I learned of Emily Jefford's program called The Collective, which was a monthly membership where she taught the business of being an artist. I learned, after a while in that, I learned that she actually had made The Collective as a response to her bigger program called Making Art Work, which she had created as a thorough program for creating the business of an artist, everything that you didn't learn in art school. And I had gone to art school and didn't learn anything about becoming an artist. So I, in 2020, started thinking about wanting to take this program. It was a big investment. 2020 was a hard year. My husband's business, where he worked, closed down for about 9 months, and money was tight. And so the thought of spending I think it was over $1,800 Canadian on this big program was so not in the realm of things. But I knew that I could cover this monthly membership. So I dove into this membership. I watched every single video, read every article, joined every weekly live as much as I could while my husband was taking the kids out on those bike rides. And throughout that whole time, my mom was dying. And I have always been encouraged by my parents to do this little art business that I had. And my mom, I think, was one of my biggest supporters and one of my biggest promoters. So she was very excited that I was working hard at trying to build up this painting business to be bigger than it had been. And I had these big dreams, but also lots of fears, because I had these two little boys, the world, who knows what was going on with the chaos of 2020, and my mom was dying, and I was trying to figure out what kind of dedication do I dedicate to my business versus spending time with my mom and spending time with 2 little boys and spending time with my husband. So with her blessing, I continued to paint, and I continued in my little course to learn about building collections and to learn about promoting your artwork, teaching people about your artwork, teaching people about why you make the art, teaching about this like expectation that they have that this collection of paintings is coming. I was able to do, I think 12 or 14 paintings for my first collection. I used my friend Steph's beautiful home to photograph them and had like a proper photo shoot. She was my stylist because she has a much better vision than I do at styling a home. And I set the date for September for the launch of my collection. And I had set the date probably 3 months in advance, continuing this whole time to promote. So the launch date was, I believe, September 14th. On September 3rd, my mom passed away. And through all of the grieving process, the dealing with funeral home stuff, making big decisions, all of these things, I had this looming thought in the back of my mind that I needed to bail on this launch of my first painting collection. And the whole time I had my mom's voice in the back of my head telling me what to do, which if you knew my mom, she loved telling people what to do. And she was saying, Riva, you would be foolish to cancel this. Don't stop releasing this collection because of me, because I would still be your biggest supporter and I would want those paintings to be out in the world. And I want you to keep doing the work that you started, because my whole life I had been very good at quitting things. And sometimes I wonder if I really let my mom down in those scenarios. She never really harped on me about it, but I think she always encouraged me anytime I started something to keep going at it because she knew, or she just believed in me. So September 14th, I launched my first collection that I had priced as being a real fine artist and promoted and created a whole story of all these paintings. And one of the paintings, the final painting, I had started right before my mom passed away. So that painting, which was the biggest painting I think I had ever done at the time, was completed after her death. And that is, I think, the only painting that looks slightly different than the rest of the collection. You can tell that there was definitely a mood shift in me. So I had launched this collection and woke up the next morning to notifications of actually selling things. And it was so cool. It was really satisfying to realize all of the work paid off and everything that I had been learning paid off and the perseverance had paid off. And fast forward in early 2021, I painted all fall 2020, did a whole launch, prepped everyone, made a bunch of paintings, launched them in 2021, and sold again. Now, I'm not like waking up to a total sold out collection, but to sales, waking up to a decent amount of sales, shocking to me. And I thought, I can do this. I can do this thing. And that whole year I did that whole pattern of creating a collection, promoting it, bringing people along, letting them know well in advance and prepping them all to buy it. And in 2021, we moved to Florida and I felt like I lost my whole demographic of customers. I was starting from scratch. it was a little depressing because I lost friends and moved far away from friends, and I had to rebuild. And so I rebuilt down there and built it back up a little bit. Not quite so much that it was, but understood that finances for people were different. And now here we are in 2026, and I am feeling that, not burnout, but I am feeling that kind of, is this right? Is this what I'm supposed to be doing? Because the whole prepping my audience, creating the launch, all of the marketing is so draining. And it is the part of business that I really don't like doing. Like, I really don't like doing. And I've been back and forth for maybe the last 3 years about whether I continue this business. And I talked about it briefly, like a few YouTube videos ago, about whether I quit my business or not. And I'm still going back and forth on that because I don't like selling. I don't like having to sell myself or convince people to buy it, my work. But the satisfaction of the pleasure that people get out of buying my work, and that my work can then fund me to make more work, and hearing stories of my work speaking to people and things like that, like, those are all great. And I feel like then it's purposeful to have my work out in the world. But at the same time, the selling part is not enjoyable to me. And I will be honest about that. That is where I get burnt out. That's where my to-do list grows because I am the queen of procrastinating all of that stuff. And I just don't like doing that. So here I am again at a season of, do I just make these little videos of how to make books and painting in the books and close my website and close selling? Or do I refine my offerings a bit and make some of these books that I haven't painted in and sell them? Because some of the books I have on currently are just totally different from the ones that I'm making now because they're older and I've made them a few years ago now. And my style has adjusted, as I feel like that's totally okay for artists to do. So if you have made it this far, I would love your input. I will not take offense if you're like, no, close your business, go ahead. But I am curious, what is it about my work that has you interested? And would you rather just see videos of me making things and you can learn from that? Or would you still like to be able to purchase my work? I didn't start this video with the intention of asking that question, and now it actually feels pretty vulnerable to put myself out there to potentially people saying, you know what, it's totally fine if you don't keep selling. But I guess I'm just taking a little survey of my followers. So if you have made it this far and are willing to share or contribute some advice about what you think I should do next, because I'm just feeling a little bit at a loss, I would love to have your opinion on that. So thank you so much for sticking around through all this story. And I hope you like this little painting and this long chat. And I will see you next time. Bye.